a real firestorm behind enemy lines. Ukrainian drones are methodically burning down strategic targets across the entire territory of Russia, from the Black Sea to the Urals. In just the last few days, the largest oil refining giants, electronic warfare bases, and massive supply depots have come under fire. A detailed chronology of the most large-scale strikes over the week is in Daniil Domian's report.
Belgorod is on fire. On August 9th, right after midnight, the city was shaken by powerful explosions. The drone attack lasted for several hours. As a result of the clumsy operation of Russian air defense, fires broke out in several districts at once, including the city center. Local residents recorded one of the impacts near the television tower. High-rise buildings and private residential areas were damaged, and parked cars ended up under concrete debris. The local governor reported damage to administrative buildings and 30 casualties. However, Russian opposition resources note that all these destructions are concentrated around strategic targets. In particular, the epicenters of the explosions are located just a few blocks from the regional FSB headquarters and only 600 meters from the Belgorod thermal power plant.
Just so you know, I have a siren hanging right there on the school.
Loud explosions and a massive fire in the Samara region. On the night of August 8th, drones successfully breached defenses and struck the Sizren oil refinery owned by the Rosneft company. The facility processes nearly 9 million tons of oil per year and provides an uninterrupted supply of diesel and aviation fuel for the occupying forces of the central and southern military districts. That same night, Ukrainian drones reached the Ilsky oil refinery in the Krasnodar region, striking another one of the enemy's fuel arteries.
Oh. What is that?
At the same time, the defense forces carried out a precision operation at sea. In the Black Sea, the Sivash drilling rig, which had been seized by the Russians, was successfully hit. The occupiers had turned it into a military base, stationing elite special forces units there, as well as equipment for guiding Shahed drones towards southern Ukraine. Furthermore, on the territory of a military unit in Gelendzhik, Ukrainian forces precisely destroyed the Russian Volna Kupol-Garant electronic warfare system. The Russians were using it to jam Starlink satellite communications.
An enemy technical surveillance post was hit on the Sivish jackup drilling rig in the Black Sea. The Sivish jackup rig is used by the enemy to house technical surveillance equipment and support its operation in the Black Sea.
Yaroslavl experienced the most massive attack of the week. On August 6th, the local governor reported that 88 drones had allegedly been shot down. However, footage from eyewitnesses confirmed precise hits on the Novoyaroslav oil refinery Slavneft Yanos. This facility is among the top 5 largest in Russia, refining 15 million tons of oil annually and supplying aviation fuel to the entire defense industry of the central district. The aftermath of the attack proved so severe that the authorities blocked exits from the city towards Moscow. Beyond the oil and gas industry, drones are methodically burning down Wildberries marketplace hubs through which the Russian army purchases ammunition and electronics. On August 5th, a massive logistics base in the city of Alexin, Tula Oblast, went up in flames. The fire at the 300,000 square meter complex sent up a plume of thick black smoke that could be seen for tens of kilometers. The Leningrad region was also here. There, the company's logistics center in the settlement of Krasny Bor suffered a massive strike. Despite the local governor's claims about 17 allegedly shot down drones, the Russians could not avoid the consequences. A massive fire broke out in the warehouse area after loud explosions. Daniel Diomin details Inter TV channel Marathon United News.
So, how have the rear area strikes on the Russian Federation affected the aggressor country's economy? And are the Russians ready for border closures and full-scale mobilization? I will ask Oleksandr Shulga, Doctor of Sociological Sciences and head of the Institute for Conflictology and Analysis of Russia. Greetings, Mr. Oleksandr.
Greetings.
So, regular strikes on Russian oil refineries, oil depots, and military facilities deep inside Russia have brought the war directly into Russian cities, causing fuel shortages and fires. From a sociological perspective, how does this destruction of the perception of safety, change the consciousness of the average Russian in general?
Well, we have long talked about the fact that Russians need to feel this war, in their everyday life. And the more of these points of feeling there are, the better. That is, not just through prices, not just through increases in utility bills, taxes, not just through the huge number of Russians who have someone who was mobilized or who signed a contract since 2022 and who died, and not just some acquaintances, but actual members of their inner circle. These are relatives and friends. And also, Russians need to see firsthand the effects of this war. Well, just by opening a window, or not even opening a window. Actually, things like oil refineries and Wildberries warehouses provide this effect because they are very often located near large cities, and accordingly, as many people as possible can see these huge black columns of smoke. This is one of the elements, plus the constant missile. For now, it's mostly drone, but let's hope for missile and drone retaliatory strikes from our side. This is also a feeling of constant anxiety. And the most important thing I would add right now is that, well, this needs to be researched more thoroughly. But my observation is that currently, reports about Russia's shelling of Ukraine no longer, well, do not receive the same propaganda ideological effect as before. Because now, after such shelling, comes our response. Of course, not at civilians, but at oil refinery facilities, at warehouses, at Wildberries, and so on. But it's inevitable, and accordingly, it's no longer a feeling of like pride in the greatness of the country, but simply the understanding that, well, we shelled them, so we have to expect a retaliatory strike. And this response could affect me personally, like through my work, through my city, and so on. So, actually, that's the stage we're at. Of course, the use of a wider range of weapons, primarily ballistic missiles, and scaling up their use is also very important. Because, again, we are, currently in 2026, right, in the second half of it, and our large-scale drone attacks are already something that goes without saying. But let's remember the summer of 23. Those were just the very first steps, the first, few dozen drones that flew into Russia. So I hope that the same situation will be the case with missiles.
Mr. Oleksandr, since you have been studying the sentiments within Russian society for a long time, in your opinion, is this constant feeling of war, anxiety, and everyday discomfort capable of transforming into real street protests and rallies?
I think we need to expect a deeper transformation, and then street protests are just, one of the indicators. It's not an end in itself. Street protests will happen only when there's a complete imbalance of the system, not before. And the imbalance of the system begins with the alpha and omega upon which this entire system is built, namely the image of the sanctity of Putin's power. When he loses the image of a great leader, a person, a strategist, a person who knows what's ahead, who has calculated everything, or who can simply outlast his enemies thanks to his willpower, when this is lost, and it is happening very rapidly right now, that in fact is the foundation of the system's imbalance. When the other elements of the system see that this fundamental base is no longer there, then the de facto transition of power begins. Not legally, but de facto. The legal side only solidifies it. What will happen when? In other words, they're already starting to wonder, who comes after Putin? Who could replace him here and now, if that need were to arise? For example, why is there so much attention in such regimes on absolute trust? Absolute support, right? There, 80%. Well, if it's less than 80%, well, somehow that's, a bit weak, right? So why is there such hysteria that Putin has 67, 66% trust according to official ratings? Well, it would seem, 66% trust, 66% support. What else do you need? But in such regimes, this is not an indicator of real trust, of real support. And Rostov, during its capture by Prigozhin, won't let you lie about that. Accordingly, the real rating is much, much lower. For example, we conducted our research in the Rostov region and in the Krasnodar territory in May and June of this year. There, the indicators of trust in Putin, real trust, are very similar, 37, 39%. In other words, the real trust in Putin, if you extrapolate, is less than 40%, and that is definitely not an absolute majority, and certainly not even half. This is very important. When this sacredness, this absolute and total appearance of support is lost, then the system begins to look for a replacement. This doesn't immediately mean street protests or a real political process, but it is a very important change that we couldn't even talk about or could only dream of back in 2022.
I have just one more question, and we don't have much airtime left. A few days ago, the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine reported that the Kremlin is preparing to increase mobilization readiness due to a slowdown in the recruitment of contract soldiers who are already becoming difficult to lure in. In general, in your opinion, is the Russian regime technically and organizationally capable of pulling off another such large-scale wave of mobilization without the risk of internal collapse?
From a technical point of view, they have done some very serious work since 2022, since the first wave of partial mobilization. From a legal and organizational standpoint, they have indeed done a great deal. This includes the electronic register of those liable for military service, as well as opening up civil registry records to the Ministry of Defense. It's also MAX, which is effectively de facto geolocation of a person and the attempt to extend it to as many Russians as possible. And soon there will be a link not just of the SIM card to the passport, but also the phone itself, meaning the phone's MEI to the passport, which will lead to even more total control. So they have done a great deal. From a legal standpoint, mobilization is not finished. They can simply say that it is, well, we are not announcing a second wave, but continuing the first one. Therefore, from this point of view, they have done a great deal. I don't think that Putin will announce, or that we will see, you and I, all at once, like in the fall of 2022, 230, 300,000 in just a few months. I think they will simply ramp it up, and whatever they don't manage to recruit through contracts, for money, for freedom, for citizenship, for debt forgiveness, they will just increase very sharply, say by 10 or 15,000 a month, with a forced mobilization component, and that's it. And effectively, in manual mode, this will be the same 200,000 that they recruited in a month or two, but it will be stretched out over years. They think that they are still confident that they will outlast us, wait us out, and crush us through sheer resources. And it seems to me that the strategy here is the same.
In any case, one should not underestimate the enemy. Thank you very much for this conversation. This was Oleksandr Shulga.
Thank you.
Doctor of Sociological Sciences, head of the Institute for Conflictology and Analysis of Russia,